Good morning, everybody. I said last week, and I'm sticking to it, I think I've got about 3-ish more lessons with you. It has been a blast. I appreciate y'all suffering through with me. And are you up next after I get done? Dave is on the on-deck circle, so whenever I get this thing closed up, Dave's ready. Oh, I can go back to having a real teacher again. All right. We are in chapter 17. About to start another scene here. I promise y'all, I do have my iPad open to the correct section every time, and I turn it to standby and it closes it off. Oop, that's lesson 12. Getting there. So what was the last scene that we studied? We said it's drawn to a close. We're about to open up a new one now. What was the last one we looked at? Just got done with? The bowls of wrath, right? So the bowls were the last of we said the bowls were the execution. So we had the scrolls, we had the seals, we had the trumpets, then we had the bowls, right? The bowls were the execution of the promises or the warnings from the trumpets, the announcements, right? So now we move on to another scene, and this is, as usual with Revelation, in contrast to another one that we've already looked at. We're introduced to the second woman that we read about in Revelation. Who is the first woman we read about in Revelation? The first woman's the mother, right? So who do we say this woman was, the mother? She was the mother of Jesus, which was Mary directly. Symbolically, though, she is... How did Jesus get here? He had to have a group of faithful people to get him here, right? So that woman is symbolic of the faithful remnant it took to get Christ here. The faithful remnant that remained, that got Christ here, as being protected in the wilderness, right? So now, and that woman is described as pure, obviously the mother of Christ. There's all things good are in this woman. In contrast to that woman, we learn of this woman. And so let's begin in chapter 17 together. Depending on your translations you're using, it's prostitute, could be whore, can't remember the other one that was there. Harlot, I think, was the other one. Then one of the 7 angels who had one of the 7 bowls came to me and said, "Come, and I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the spirit to a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and had 7 heads and 10 horns. Does that beast sound familiar at all? The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written the name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. There are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour. together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are the peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw there, sorry, I lost my place. 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. So that at least we know who the woman is, right? At the very end of the chapter, we are finally told who the woman is, and that is Rome. But wait a minute, isn't the beast Rome / the emperor? So who was the little beast, the beast of the earth? What do we say that beast was? The big beast, beast out of the water, that was Rome or the emperor. Either way you want to go with that, doesn't matter. Interchangeable terms as far as this is concerned. The beast that came up out of the earth that spoke blasphemies and encouraged people to worship the big beast, right? False prophets. The teachers, the prophets of the beast. So any preachers that were preaching the religion of the beast, which was Rome. So the religion of Rome. All those who perpetuated, who taught, and caused people to stumble or worship Rome itself, right? They're the prophets. They're false prophets, the false teachers of Rome. Let's just think critically. Satan today, then, whatever, has, as far as influence over us, a limited arsenal. We talked about directly, he has the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, and the lust of the flesh, right? But thinking about not just individual sin, but how he can affect us as a people, he still only has about 3 tools, okay? He has brute force, as we see here by the Roman Empire, brute or political force, right, where he can actually just hammer it down your throat. That could be your school bully coming up and punching you if you say that, I'm not going to do that. So, that's the brute force, right? Then you have people trying to mislead you, trying to tell you wrong, trying to teach you wrong, false teachers. And the last way that he can pull you away is totally opposite of the other two. It's not a false teaching. It's not a brute force. It's a lure. It's a bait. It's an enticement. So we have the beast out of the sea. We said the ocean was what? The sea was what? It's tumultuous, but it is not the sea of blood. I mean, it was turned to blood, but the beast came out of the sea, and we said that the sea was indicative or symbolic of, what did we just read? That the prostitute said on the sea was the peoples and nations, right? That's what chapter 17 just said the sea was. And we said that earlier. It just points it out directly here. Okay, so the tumult of the peoples, out of the nations arose Rome. Out of all the conflict and the rise and fall of empires and nations, Rome comes out of the ocean, okay? And so then this prostitute is sitting on those waters, and so she comes from the same place. It's because it's still Rome. But the big beast, the beast out of the sea, is Rome itself. It's the political power. It is that brute force aspect of Satan's power. The false prophets arise up out of the earth, out of the same place where Satan's lies went. Remember, the earth swallowed up the flood from Satan's mouth whenever he tried to drown the woman. So the earth, the same thing that swallowed up all those lies, the torrent of Satan, out of that comes up the other beast, who is smaller like a lamb, and it preaches things to mislead you. There's your false teachers. There's your other attempt to lead you astray. Okay. Now we have the harlot, the third tool. This is, that looks good. That looks like fun. That's going to be a lot easier if we just do that. Right? And it's almost hilarious to me that he uses a prostitute as the analogy here. Because an ugly prostitute's probably not going to do too well. I mean, right? It's not going to go as well. That's the thing about sin is it's ugly and it's horrible, right? And what it does to you is awful. But man, it doesn't look that way. Sin would not be a temptation if it looked ugly as it actually is. If we could look at sin and realize and see how fettering and just nasty, remember the boils and the impurities that were coming up as we read earlier. If we could see that, we wouldn't be tempted by sin. But we don't. It looks good. It looks fun. It looks harmless even. That's the problem. And that's why it's so good, such a great analogy to this harlot here, this great harlot. Not only a harlot, but the mother of all harlots. There's none who has done her job like this one. And she is in absolute contrast to the other woman we read about. So everything that is good and pure is the mother of Jesus, the one that's protected, the faithful remnant. Now we have this one who is nothing. There's nothing good in this second woman, right? So who is the harlot? She is Rome, but she is the allurement, the lust side of it, right? So we've got three sides of it, each one portrayed by a different thing. She came out of the many waters. Verse 15, as I already pointed out, says this is the peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So she, same place the big beast came out of. She sits on a scarlet-colored beast. Now this beast is described exactly as the beast that came out of the water. We're given a color this time, but other than that, it's listed as the same beast. There's no reason to think that this is a different beast. Okay, this is that same beast that came out of the waters. There's a little bit of debate on who the harlot is, which is comical to me because what do you read at the very end? It tells you exactly who. The very last verse of chapter 17 tells you exactly who the harlot is, right? So why do we have debate on this? I have no idea. But we do. Some people will argue that it's actually the Catholic Church. They'll even go so far as to name individuals or sects or SECTS, not SEX, of different religions and pieces trying to claim that this is some sort of thought. But the Bible is always its best explainer and best clarifier. And like I said, the very last verse literally says it is Rome. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. It's pagan Rome. It's a symbol for seductive, enticing, and appealing desires. Okay. She sits on the scarlet-colored beast. This beast has a new description. We weren't given a color earlier. Now it's scarlet. What's scarlet? The color of royalty, right? It's a red color, but it's the color of royalty. It's the color of sin. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18 calls scarlet the color of sin. She's royally evil, right? She's got a robe. She's got a crown. She's clothed in purple and scarlet. She's got fancy jewelry. Her cup, she has a golden cup that contains the reason for her ruin, right? All the things that she has given to the kings of the earth to make them drunk. She holds in her hand that cup. Did you raise your hand, brother? Yeah, well, the kids, at the risk of sounding old, these kids today would say, "Oh, she's snatched." Yeah, so she's decked out, man. Like I said, a prostitute that's ugly and not, a prostitute that's ugly and wearing sackcloth covered in boils probably not going to have a whole lot of luck, right? Right? Not real enticing there, but you get a woman, she's not going to turn a whole lot of heads. You get a woman that's decked out, she's got her hair done nice clothes, got the jewelry on, she's got the walk, she's got the looks, she's got the clothes, she got it. That's this prostitute, right?
No, we use color in a way in the same sense. You ever heard what they call the red light district?
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's all about that type of industry, whatever you want to call it. Red is colorless.
Yep. She's marked as the mother of all harlots and of the abominations of the earth. Why does he start out? What is this mystery that they're talking about before he names the harlot? The harlot has her name written on her head, but she must have a very large forehead because that's quite the title. Okay, that's got to be a couple lines at least. Maybe that's a 5 head. But the mystery is now revealed, right? Because it says this is a mystery. So, but then they tell what the mystery is. They said the gig's up. She looks good. It's everything you would want, right? If you're looking for something to attach yourself to, if you're looking for a spouse, you're looking for a mate, is that not exactly who you'd want? Someone who's got their hair, someone who's got the walk, someone who's got the clothes, someone's got it going on, right? We should all be able to look at our partners, and sometimes you look at it and be like, I cannot believe that, right? But that's what Emily says about me all the time. But usually you should look at them and be like, yeah, sir, nailed it, right? That's the whole idea. This should be the person you want to attach yourself to. But he's saying that mystery, I'm going to ruin it for you. That's not what she looks like. That's not what she is. The mystery is revealed. This is her true character. She is a drunkard. She is drunk on sin and the blood of the saints. What she's drunk on is the blood of the saints, right? But what she's getting the nations drunk on, what she has allured all the other people to her with, it's not the blood of the saints. It's herself. It's her enticement. She's got them drunk on her, but what she is drunk on is the blood of the saints. Let's just pause because we kind of have to here. If we have a harlot, it's going to kind of be the opposite of pure and undefiled, right? What are the faithful called to be? What are they told to be in chapter 14? They said one group of people is going to inherit heaven. What were they? Yes, it's in the same chapter. 144,000 received the stamp, right? Got the right there on the forehead for not forehead. It was a hand for those who are still to God. But right there with that first section in chapter 14. If you look, are you reading? Are you in chapter 14 right there? Okay. Anybody in chapter 14 for me real quick? Look at that first section right there where it's talking about the 144,000 being called out, being chosen, being marked. What does that same group have? They have the name of their father. They have not done what? What are they? Not defiled with the woman. They are virgins. They are virgins. And when we went through chapter 14, we stopped and we talked about that, right? We're not saying you have to live a celibate life, right? You can get married. It's not talking about being literally a virgin. We're talking spiritually. So spiritually, they are virgins. Those 144,000, those who are stamped, those who are marked, those who are called out, those who are chosen, which are any of those who answer the call, right? Christians in general. If they're called to be virgins, pure, undefiled by woman. What woman? This woman, right? This woman. This is the woman that they were not to associate themselves with. This was the woman that they were not supposed to be defiled with. So think about this. Remember, what is this whole thing? What is the church? We are the what of Christ? Body, yes. Starts with a B, bride. The bride of Christ. Are we married yet? No, we're not married yet. We are the to be. Right now we're engaged. When is our wedding feast? Judgment Day. That's our wedding. That's when we go home. That's when we are married to Christ. That's when we go home with Christ to be with Him. That is our wedding day. Until then, we are His fiancé. We are His. But we have to stay pure and undefiled. But if we defile ourselves with this woman, we are not. And remember, this is talking about sin. This is talking about Rome and its allurement. But it's not just Rome here. Remember, it's written to the first century Christians, just like, all the other letters were. But we take those and we apply those lessons that we can learn to our lives here. So it's not just symbolic. Yes, it's Rome. It's not just Rome. This is sin. Like I said, sin would have no power over us if it didn't look like a good spouse. We wouldn't be called to draw near to it if it didn't look like a good time.
I was having a discussion when I was a young man with my aunt. She had a lot of influence on me. And we were talking about lust after a woman, whether or not she's that type of woman or not dressed properly, whatever. She said, if you're passing by or you're seeing a woman like that, said that first look is for you. You're going to recognize the person there. Said that long look and stare is for the devil.
It's an interesting way to think about it.
That helped me a lot.
I got you. And she she's trying to be looked at, right? That's what she's after.
They know that.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. So yeah, that's in contrast not only to the first woman we meet, but to us as Christians who are called to be virgins, who are not to associate with the woman. This is the woman that we read about earlier. This is the other choice we have. No man can serve two masters, right? You're going to have to choose who you're married to. You're going to be the bride of Christ, or you're going to be with this harlot, because the harlot doesn't have any husbands. We're going to read momentarily where she's bragging and she says, I will not be a widow. Why was she not going to be a widow? Well, because she's not married. She will just simply entice you and lead you away. And you will have a hole in you forever. And that hole can only be filled by Christ. Is that not what we see? Is that not what we feel before we are called to Christ? She's riding on the beast. We've already talked about the beasts. We already said it's the Roman Empire, or the emperor, interchangeable. That the beasts authorizes the persecution, right? That's the political power. So it gives the harlot, it authorizes the power to give the harlot what she desires, and that's the blood of the saints. That's what she becomes drunk on. We've already talked about the abyss. Remember back in chapter 9, we read about the smoke from the abyss being opened. Your translation may use the word perdition. If you see the word perdition in there, what she's calling you to, this is only used twice in Revelation. It means destruction or utter ruin, because we don't really study the word perdition very much. So I just wanted to help you out if you had that in your Bible. Destruction or utter ruin, it's the total loss of well-being. Now let's get it into some of this clear as mud stuff. You got the seven, we started talking about the beast, and he was and is and about to be and used to be and could be and why not be, and there's 7 hills and 10 horns, but the heads are the hills and the horns and the people, and there's 7, and there's, what does all of that mean? Let me help you out a whole lot. I have no idea. This is one of those, okay? I will give you the same warning I've given repeatedly, though. There have been countless people who have spent thousands of hours, I'm sure, trying to figure out the ins and outs of that. Literally trying to tie, all right, where do we start? Do we start, is it empires? Do we start at Egypt and we move up to Babylon and then Medo-Persian Empire, and then what's the next one? Greeks and then Romans? Like, where do we start counting the 5? Who's the 6? What happens to 7? And where in the world does the 8 come in that becomes part of the 7? I don't know, right? So there's no point in trying to tie this in, trying to figure out where to start, trying to figure out if it's empires. You can try to figure out if it's rulers. Where do you start? Do you start at Nero? Do you start at Dominicus? Do you start at where? Do you start at trying to figure out with rulers and how far back you go with 7? Do you count all the big ones? Do you count all of them? Because there's a whole bunch of them that you really don't read anything about. So there's not actually a clean line of rulers there like you would think it would be. Totally pointless. Not worth your effort, not worth your time. I will tell you flat out, I don't have a nice, clean answer here. It's entirely possible it could have been tied directly to that stuff. In the first century, they've been like, okay, man, yeah. I can't stand before you and tell you any of those shenanigans. I can tell you what it means to us, though, and what it's symbolic and meant to them, right? We've already talked the 7 mountains. So when we talk about the seven mountains, it says the 7 heads of 7 mountains. Rome was actually surrounded by 7 hills, like geographically it is. It was known for that. It's part of the crown that surrounds Rome. They were pretty proud of it. So despite all the horns of the kings and trying to count them, it's much better off if we just stay symbolic here. 7 and 10 are what numbers in apocalyptic literature? Complete, perfect, right? So 7 to 10. So this is not just like we had the 7 churches of Asia, the 7 candlesticks. We had the 10 whatever. We had the 7 trumpets, 7 seals. We have had 7 bowls. We've had, there's a whole lot of numbers in the book of Revelation. Have we yet taken any literally? Should we start taking any literally? No, that'd be a bad idea, okay? So staying with the theme of this is symbolic, there's all of the kings of the earth, 10, right? All, the complete number of the kings of the earth, okay? I'm going to read, this came out of one of the 3 books that I was working with here. I like the way they worded it. The 7 kings, therefore, were a symbolic number, representing all kings or kingdoms, past, present, and future, that would oppose the kingdom of God. Each who would come would still be part of the 7. Although kingdoms arise out of the upheavals of the sea of society, their anti-God rulers originate in the abyss, the Satan realm. Each continues for a little while, then goes into perdition, which is the end of all who opposed God. That's as simple as I can really find an explanation to give it. I like the way they word it. I wasn't going to try to reword it. All the rulers who have opposed God, who do oppose God, and who will oppose God. Right? That's exactly what it says. He was, he is, and is to come. When it's talking about these powers. Let's keep it simple. Go use the KISS method. Keep it simple. You can use the second S and figure that one out. Okay? So all the rulers that were, are, and will be that opposed God. These are the same people who will be marked with not God's seal, but with Satan's seal. They're also called the Antichrist. Not the rulers themselves, but any who deny Christ are the Antichrist, right? Was it Peter tells us that? And the harlot is a temptation to all of the flesh. So sin, the allurement thereof, is an allurement to all, including these rulers who will come up. They will continue to want to be in bed with the harlot, to be drunk on what she offers, because the temptations and the power and the lust after the sin doesn't go away. It's still sin. So even when it's no longer Rome, those that will come, honestly, do we not still today look back at Rome and what they had, the opulence, the incredible beauty, the education that they had at their hands, the architecture, the engineering? They were doing things in Egypt and Rome that we still can't figure out how they did. And frankly, we're still struggling to figure out engineering-wise how to do it ourselves. We still look back at that and say, how are they doing some of that stuff? And we still look back at that and want to be to that level, right? Money was not a problem for most people. Unless you were a slave, there's a huge income gap. We talked about that. It was going to get worse. It was prophesied to get worse. That was what the black horse was at the very beginning. But if you were rich, and a lot of people were in this empire, especially in Rome itself, there's nothing you couldn't have. Literally. You could afford whatever. You could afford humans. You could afford animals, furniture, drugs, whatever it was that you wanted. You could just have it. There's nothing holding you back. That much power, that much freedom, that much free time does not do well for them, or did not do well for them, and it doesn't do well for us, right? With great power comes great responsibility. Best Spider-Man quote. Thanks, Uncle. Right? But it's right. These horns, which are the rulers, then turn on the harlot and kill her. Okay? So remember, Rome, there's 3 reasons Rome fell. Not necessarily scripturally, just historians agree. External conflict, internal conflict, and natural disasters, right? So these horns turning on the harlot are internal and external conflict. These same worldly kings who are so disillusioned and drunk on Rome's lifestyle, the sin and allurement of sin, will turn and destroy her. And why will they do that? Is because they were like, you know what, never mind. No, because they still wanted to be with the harlot. That's because God put in their hearts to do his mind. Does this mean that all of a sudden they were like, you know what, like Paul on the road to Damascus, just, hey, pay attention, guys. And they're like, never mind, we've converted. Is that what this means? No. Think back to Egypt. When Egypt glorified God, so much so that 40 years later, when the children of Israel showed up on Jericho's doorstep, that Jericho as an entire city was terrified, wouldn't come out to meet the army that was marching around their gates, even though that army was not an army. You had all sorts of folks mixed into that. It was people marching around your gate. You wouldn't even come out and face the people. They were shaking. They were terrified, right? That was 40 years later. So whenever God used Egypt to glorify himself, to demonstrate his power, we talked about the signs. Eventually, Pharaoh's sorcerers said, you know what? This is God. I can't do this. It only took us, 3 or 4 plagues in, and they're like, tapping out. I can't do that one. He wins. God used Egypt to glorify himself against Egypt's will. Despite Egypt's best efforts, he glorified himself with Egypt. So it's not that he magically converted all these people to do his will. He used them with what they had in their hearts, with what they were doing, to glorify himself and tear down the harlot. Any thoughts, questions? And that's as far as we're going to that mud puddle of is, was, and used to be stuff, because there's no point. Okay? So we read about the harlot and her allurement and her enticement. Okay, let's go into 18. I have to do 18 fast if we're going to get there. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. The kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living." Then I heard another voice from saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. For her sins are reaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double portion for her in the cup that she mixed. As she glorified herself and lived in luxury, so give her a like measure of torment and mourning. Since in her heart she says, I sit as a queen. I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see. For this reason her plagues will come in a single day, death and mourning and famine. Then she will be burned up with fire, for mighty is the Lord God who has judged her. And the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear of torment and say, Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city, Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wood, all kinds of articles of ivory, all kinds of articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, as opposed to that non-fine flour, I suppose, wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, that is, human souls. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your delicacies and splendors are lost to you, never to be found again. The merchants of those wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls. For in a single hour all this wealth has been laid waste. All the shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors, and all those who trade as on the sea stood far off and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city is like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying out, Alas, alas, for the great city where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. For in a single hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, So will Babylon the great city be thrown down with violence and will be found no more. And the sounds of harpists and musicians, of flute players and trumpeters will be heard in you no more. And a craftsman of any craft will be found in you no more. The sound of the mill will be heard in you no more. The light of a lamp will shine in you no more. The voice of the bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and of saints and of all who have been slain on the earth. Riches and sin flowed freely for these rich people, as we were just discussing. There was literally nothing that they could not get hold of. Anything they wanted. Their purses had grown fat on the sins of Rome, and they watched from a distance to avoid Rome's fate. They can't help but to miss the harlot and all of her pleasures. None of their lives will be the same, and likely many of them will be ruined at the fall of Rome. There's no one to buy your luxurious wares, and your luxurious wares are just ridiculously expensive, and the only people who can buy them just went down the drain, you're going to have a hard time getting rid of that. Now you have a huge investment in something that you can't get rid of and you can't make your money back on. Financial ruin followed for many merchants, I'm sure, at the fall of Rome. The harlot here is fallen. That's what it's saying. She's being judged. She has fallen. Past tense, right? It says, so 17 says it's coming, and then now we have fallen. So this is looking forward. The harlot has fallen. She's a haunt for every unclean spirit, unclean bird, and every detestable beast. The carrion eaters have arrived to feast on her rotten, which in life, was she any better than rotten flesh? So they're here to feast on her rotten flesh. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. Once again, not literally sexual immorality, but spiritually sexual immorality. They have partaken of all that enticement, that allurement of sin. They've taken it in. They've become fat and rich off of it, right? And the kings have committed immorality with her. The merchants have gone rich from her luxurious living. Then you have a call to the people. How many times in the New Testament are we called out? That's one of the definitions of what it is to be a Christian, right? Is the called or the chosen. You're a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. You are different. You are called out. How many times in the New Testament are we called out? We're set aside. This is not a plea to leave Rome itself. There's no point in that. Seek safety, but Rome was literally the whole world. You're not going to actually be able to flee physically Rome. It would behoove you to go back and study Ezekiel if you have not. I want to say it's 24-ish, but I didn't write it down. But go study Ezekiel and the fall of actual Babylon. Look at the prophecies that followed through there and how that was spelled out. And in Ezekiel, whenever they're calling for them to come out of Babylon, they're actually saying leave Babylon, like leave the city. It's about to be bad, guys. So that's an actual literal calling out of Babylon. But just like everything I said, Revelation is a contrast, right? So just like that contrast with Ezekiel, where you have the fall of true Babylon, not symbolically Babylon, but the actual empire of Babylon. You have that city falling, and it said, come out. You better leave. It's about to get bad. It's about to get nasty, right? Get out of the city. Here we're being spiritually called out in Revelation. Leave Rome out of your lives. Do not partake with the harlot. What is Revelation telling you to do the whole time? From the beginning of Revelation, the message has been the same that Moses gave the Israelites before they went into the promised land. Stand firm. I got you. Stand fast. That's the call. That's Revelation. Stand fast. I got your back. We're going to win. That's it. The call here is a reminder of that. Do not partake in that. Get away from her. Get away from her. There's a couple of time frames mentioned. Once again, we're not going to take any numbers literally starting now. We haven't the whole time. So, fallen in a day, right? All these judgments, all the plagues will come upon her in a day. She'll fall in an hour. Rome lasted almost 1,300 years, depending on how you count the empire. Compared to this, her fall would be but this short time span, right? It gives a really oddly specific list of trade goods that the merchants are stuck with. We could associate those with the harlot and say that those were what she had. Many of those are the first things that they say are wasted with the merchants, are the things that the harlot was clothed in. Couldn't really find any good symbolic meaning there. We're just going to say the merchants were stuck with all those trades. I was reading accounts of where it was like, oh yes, those aromatic woods came from North Africa, and all the cinnamon probably came from China. Who cares? Nobody cares. So the merchants are stuck with these goods, and most of these goods listed are luxuries, things that are not necessities. It's not like they're going to just stop off at some other town and be like, yeah, you want these? And they're like, yeah, I'll take some bread. It's not how this works. They're stuck with things that are too expensive for your average person to buy. Only those people who had partaken with Rome, were part of Rome, and had the opulence could afford. So once Rome has fallen and the people in her can no longer afford those goods, then the merchants who had those goods, like I said, they can't get rid of them. So, of course, those merchants, they're going to stand afar off. They got their boats. They're going to be like, whoa, that was ugly. I don't want to be in that. But they have nothing to do with their goods now. They're stuck. They're ruined. Then you contrast this with the rejoicing of the saints and the prophets, those who deal in spiritual goods, right? So the ones who are rich in spiritual things are rejoicing. Those who are rich in material things are now destroyed and useless, and they're lamenting. They're throwing ash on their heads, or dust, whatever your translation says. It's common practice. We read about ash and sackcloth throughout the Old Testament. Asian countries would throw dust on their heads. Same thing. It's a symbol of mourning when we read about these seafarers, these merchants throwing dust on their head. And it gives us a really weird list of oddly specific things that will stop in Rome again. Once again, just a weirdly specific list of things. Just overall, what do these things mean? There's no light. There's no music. There's no crafts. There's no food. There's no light. There's no weddings. Your daily living activities, those joyous things that you have, will cease. Nothing good will be found in you as you fall. And then if you'll just mark and go check out 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. It's just talking about Satan's cunning appeal to the flesh. So the harlot has fallen, and then we'll talk about, so if we have, now we read about the death of the harlot, and she's going to be thrown into the fire, as promised here. So we have two other pieces to get rid of still, right? We still have to get rid of the beast of the sea and the beast of the earth. So those are coming. That should be next Sunday.
Answer your question, we are called daily.
Yes. I meant
Constantly.
right. I meant how many times in Scripture, but you were touche. You're absolutely correct. Every day we are called constantly. There's never a time when we are not called to be with God and to be next to God as God's chosen people. Thank y'all so much. Like I said, study up. We've knocked out the harlot. Now we got to take out both the beasts, and Rome will be down.